I think we'll just leave it up in the air, but we'll get back to you very soon about that, when it's going to happen. And that'll take place at Grant Street Studios. And so you can see Ben's set up there. And also, he's going to give us a brief tour of the ASU Photograd Studios, probably with not very many students there, but we might get to see some grad students too. And then the next event after that is in July, and that is uh, um, Julia Nand and Damon Sauer, who are a group of a couple of, they're a couple, romantically a couple, but also artistically a couple. They make work together, and it's really good. And I've seen quite a bit of it. I think you might, those of you who have been around a while might recall that they won the last of the awards that In Focus did. Their work about satellites was
Yeah.
really great.
Oh yeah.
And they have a new body of work that's really amazing too, that are photographs of NASA artifacts. So
Oh,
that'll be in July. We haven't nailed down a date for that. Um, and then tonight's event is the portfolio review with Sandra Eisert. And I first want to do a shout out for Arizona board member Susan Richetti, who had connected us as an organization with Sandra. Thank you for that, Susan. We, I'm just going to give a very brief highlights of Sandra's resume and impressive resume. We don't have time for the whole thing, but she was a picture editor at the White House. That is the White House, um, with the Washington Post and an Associated Press Washington bureau, all picture editors in all those places. She worked on setting up web presences for the Department of Defense, Microsoft, and MSNBC. So you've seen her work. She's also done a great deal of editing, and she's helped give birth to over 100 books, working on editing, design, and her strategy for those book projects. It's really a remarkable amount of experience. And Sandra is able to is makes part of her living, working with photographers and artists, and she has a number of really well thought out and flexible packages to work with photographers. So if you like what you hear tonight, she is available one-on-one or with a group of people. I think it's a remarkably well thought out program. So you can just Google her name, or her website is called The Professional Eye, all one word, .com, and you can look for her there. And in the run up to this event, I've been thinking about this is a kind of a new sort of event for us. And I think that we're going to be able to try and do this again on a kind of a semi-ongoing basis. And so I think tonight is kind of an exciting night for that reason. And This, whether you call it a seminar or a critique or a portfolio share, this has been the basis of photographic education for decades, this format. And it's really I mean, it's something I look back really fondly on in grad school, and it can be really tricky to initiate, and then maintain this kind of thing after you get out of school. A lot of people feel sort of bereft of an audience that they had earlier, and so I think if we can step into the breach and provide this kind of thing for our membership, I think there's, the attendance tonight is an indication that I think there's a hunger for this. I certainly feel it myself, and treasure the time I spend talking to other photographers about my work. And I've kind of maintained a network of people that I go out to the desert with. And so I think that Arizona Photography Alliance is pretty well positioned to sort of help facilitate this kind of community building. Um, and so if there's interest, we're certainly going to do this again. And I wanted to talk just specifically about how tonight's participants were chosen, because it is the first time we're doing this. In some sense, I want to sort of start with people who have participated in this kind of format before. And in another way, in a way to show the membership how a conversation like this goes, because it's not something you know initially if you've never done it before. And so in the future, we'll be opening this up to the general membership and have an open call. But I just thought this first time around, it might be useful to just invite people and kind of do a demonstration version. And I'm just looking at my notes here. I'll just end with, before I hand it off to Sandra, I'll just end with a little anecdote. Back in 2000, Mark Klett had an exhibit at the Arizona State University Art Museum, and Marilyn Zeitlin was the curator there, and they spent a lot of time talking about Mark's work in the course of conceiving and installing the collection of the exhibition. And at one point, Marilyn just turned to Mark and said, "You know, you think your work is about place, but I think it's about time." Um, and that was such a gift to Mark. I've talked to Mark a lot about that moment, and it just getting that insight and someone coming at your work from a slightly different angle, that made so much sense to him at the time. So Mark launched on a series called Time Studies as a direct result of that comment. And I noted that his recent enormous retrospective book is called Seeing Time. So two data points to suggest that this kind of outside look at your work can be very useful. So without further ado, I'm going to hand this off to Sandra, and we'll see what happens.
Okay. Well, I must admit that I come from a little bit of a different world. My background has been mainly journalism. Um, I've had about as broad an experience in journalism as you could have, but I have been collecting photographs. I have a minor white here behind me, and there's a couple of Edwin Curtises on the other side of the room, and of course Ansel is upstairs, and Imogene Cunningham, and Jerry Ullsman, and um, uh, Sexton, and a lot of different things. So I've been trying to broaden my landscape a lot, and um, so I want you to understand that I come from the bias of the audience. In all of the work that I have always done, I am asking, what does this mean to the audience? It may mean a great deal to the photographer, but if you are presenting this to other people other than your mother, um, you you want it to communicate something to them, and so I kind of stand in the gap for the audience um, as I look at work, and I try to always be as honest as I possibly can. Um, I know that criticism is hard, um, but I don't want to make it hard. I want to make it productive. And uh, I would also say that if I say something about your work that you in your heart of hearts don't think is true, don't accept it. I have been told things throughout my career that just simply weren't right. Either the person didn't understand or they begrudged me. I mean, I've been the first woman or minority to do this. And so sometimes you get some blowback just because you're different and you're therefore a threat, especially if you're better than somebody. Um, and so you have to learn, what resonates within you, whether you like it or not, and what is just not meant for you. So I want to look at these things in that fashion. I would also admit that I have a terrible time with artist statements. I often find that it's a lot of, you know, and not much about what I expect to be there. I would like to say that this group of artist statements is one of the most interesting ones that I have been through. And I just judged the Leica Women's Grant, and so I've been through a bazillion of these artist statements, and I thought that these were particularly good statements. The question is always, how much of the statement do you need to get your message across to the audience? And um, if you require a in-depth um, expression of what you're doing, maybe you need to work harder on your pictures. So, any rate, with that, I was going to say something else, and I can't think what it was, but I'm sure it'll zoom around the airport here pretty soon. We had a little bit of trouble with um, uh, the Dropbox presentation. So, and normally what I wanted to do initially was just say 2 or 3 words about the artist statements, but because these are such good statements, I really can't do that. So I want to try to find a way to do the statement first, if I can find it. And hang on here. And I don't see that. Yeah, here it is. Okay, so if we do a screen share and we open this up, oh, well, that's not where it's supposed to be. Here we have, let's see, no. So this is Dean Taraski's work. And in case you can't read it on your screen, it says these photo montages is from a body of work called Veiled Inscriptions. Their source material is a collection of letters that fell out of a building's wall as it was being remodeled in Denver, Colorado. Hidden for almost 70 years, these letters were requests mailed by Japanese Americans who were illegally removed from their homes and forced into War Relocation Authority incarceration camps during World War II. The handwritten requests were sent to Japanese American businesses that were still functioning during the war. That business, TK Pharmacy, was owned and operated by my uncles. I am on a journey to photograph all the incarceration camp sites. I make photo montages to reunite the TK Pharmacy letters with the location where they were written. Beyond their historical value, the TK Pharmacy letters are deeply connected to my own Japanese American experience. The layered visual content is very much like the mystery of my own identification, isolated, transformed, and still revealing itself. The letters are important for what they request: hair dye, stomach remedies, dignity, and as a compelling reminder about the fragility of human rights amidst social disruption. I was really intrigued by this description. I have a friend, Paul Kitagaki Jr., who has done a massive amount of work on the Japanese concentration camps. And I hope that you are in touch with him. He's really an amazing photographer and has done a lot of work on this. So let's see what we have here. These, I must, oh, I know what I was going to say.
So,
These are,
Sandra,
yeah,
excuse me. Let's see, I think that you had intended to share your screen, but it's not being shared.
it's not being shared. Well, that does
Right.
not look good. Desktop one. Hmm. That's supposed to be the screen share.
I have access to all the images and can do it for
You
you,
want to do that?
Sandra.
You want
Yeah,
to do that?
let's give that
Okay,
a
let's
shot.
do that.
I think, well, Kathy's getting the images together. I might just say that if you're not going to speak, be great to have you just set it to mute because the camera follows any sounds.
Right.
And it'd be nice to, yeah. So if you
I
can kind
do,
of mute
I
yourself.
do. Yeah, we're probably going to be able to spend about 7 minutes or so on each photographer, which is really not enough. Um, and uh, but I would say if you have burning questions that you think you're going to explode if you don't speak up, go ahead and speak up. And I certainly do want to hear from the photographer. I was particularly touched by this first image. This the empty swings, the hills, the handwriting, all of this. Uh, I got the feeling from what uh, the photographer was trying to do. You want to go to the next? Let's just go through the rest of the sequence and just keep going through. Okay, I think that's the set. Um, I think the first picture I was really taken by because it's haunting. It speaks of the emptiness of this place, which should never have been in the first place. And the letter is framed by these empty swings that would have been filled with children. But as I go through the rest of it, I begin to feel more of a monotony to it. I mean, it's kind of interesting, but since I don't read Japanese, I I can't really tell really so much what's going on, and I rely very heavily on the captions. And so I would think, uh, try to think about ways that you can not rely so heavily on the captions, but think about the environment that the setting is in more. Does that make any sense to you, Dean?
So I've been making longer and longer, I still call them titles, to try and convey a little bit of the meaning. I envision these eventually of being a book, which would be accompanied probably with an index of actual translations of the letters.
Mm-hmm.
Um, um,
I would suggest if you do that, that you do the translations of the letters aside the pictures, because I think people instantly want to know what does this mean. I don't think that they can make sense of what's going on there if they don't have the translations near them. And you can, do your picture on one page and then gray out slightly the translations on the other page so they don't leap out in front of you instead of the uh, pictures. But
I would really consider that very, very strongly. Ultimately, I think that um, a lot of the letters are pretty banal in their content because they are, I mean, they're conventions where they will say, I apologize for writing this letter. I, where in our culture, there's no, I don't know why you'd
nobody
apologize for that.
apologizes for writing a letter. Yeah,
Right. But
unless it's for
I
the
bring you
opera.
trouble by making this request, which is a very Japanese thing to do.
What what
Um,
what I think. Well, go ahead and finish your point.
but ultimately the content is pretty businesslike because they're basically mail order requests.
Uh huh.
Um, and I don't know. I mean, this is part of my own sort of mystery about the loss in these letters. I really don't know exactly what they say.
Yeah.
Occasionally, I believe that they're anecdotes about life in camp, but not in every letter.
What I would kind of suggest with this is that you think about this in slightly different way, and this first picture inspires me, um, is to think about, first of all, your audience can't read the letters in 99% of the cases. And as you say, they're not exactly great poetry, or, I mean, they have interesting information in them, but it's information you could summarize in an introduction, or a narrative that you ran through the book too, but certainly an introduction. But I would begin to think less about including the letters in the photographs than I would about the haunting quality of what is left of this place, of these camps that you go see. I mean, we need to remember this. And we need to know that people just like us lived under these kinds of circumstances. And like here, for example, in a couple of these, I can't really tell what you're trying to say, or really what's even in the photograph. That looks like some rocks and a tree, and yet I can't really tell what's going on. So I would think about not superimposing the letters on everything, maybe just that first one, and really find the haunting moments that are reminders of what we have intentionally left behind in our memories. Does that make any sense to you?
Um, yeah, yeah, it does. It does. I'll take that under consideration.
Yeah. Okay. Is there anything else I can tell you?
Um, when you say that you're speaking like from a point of view of an audience, um, I think that word audience shifts. I mean, for if you're a photojournalist, the audience is sort of a more generalized
Right.
person out in the public. But if you are an artist, it might be people who go to museums, which I think is a much smaller
That
set
is a
of
much
people,
smaller, it's a much smaller set of people.
um, or collectors, perhaps.
Mhm.
Um,
I could,
can
to
can you
me,
say that these are more envisioned toward, say, a collecting audience or a museum audience?
I think the way they're presented that they are, but I also think that that this could have more mass appeal than that. Um, I mean, we're really talking about how we're going to handle people at the southern border right now, and we
Right.
have forgotten what we have done here. And so I think this is a very contemporary topic, and that you could reach a broader audience with a book, or a rotating lecture, a rotating show, or something like that. Which is why I suggest that you really focus more on this haunting quality of these places. It's almost what's missing that is the important thing in these pictures.
Oh, thank you. That's really marvelous feedback.
Okay. Shall we go on to the next?
Oh, I have one more question.
Oh,
Um, so I send out a PDF every
yeah,
6 months or so. Would you be interested in me sending that PDF to you?
of course.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Sandra.eisert@gmail.com. And Eisert is spelled the way Germans do. The first letter is fake. Eisert. You don't pronounce the first letter. I just came back from a trip to Germany to the Leica headquarters, and I was able to actually go to the place where my great grandparents got married, and I was able to stand in that chapel and see the various spellings of Eisert because nobody was literate, and so I was even standing in the urgent care at University of Washington, and the fellow behind me said, "What did you say your name was?" And I said, Eisert. And he said, "How do you spell that?" And I told him. And he said, "That's very curious. My mother's name is Eisert, but it has an H in it. And it's because all these things were spelled phonetically, you know."
Uh,
So, at any rate.
I
So,
the
Sandra,
pharmacy, the building still stands.
yeah,
TK Pharmacy is still
that's
there.
great. That's great.
It's not a pharmacy anymore, but yeah, I've stood there and it's magical to be in those places.
Yeah, I just think that this is a really important topic that we need to um, let sink into us, because otherwise we're going to do this all over again. And it wasn't right the first time, and it isn't right this time.
Thank you.
Okay. Let me know if I can help you in any way.
Thank you.
Okay. Can we go to the next one?
Do you have a request or should I just go through the list
Just
that I have here?
through the list.
Okay, we have Sid Peroni coming up next. Stand by.
Okay. So can we read the artist statement first, please? I really was impressed with these artist statements. I mean, I've just read so many bad artist statements, and these were really helpful to me. Okay, Tiny Cosmologies looks at a landscape of life's transient nature through the metaphor of melting ice cubes. Boy, did that ever light my imagination up. The images become physical evidence of the passage of time and the truth of impermanence. With this work, the truth of impermanence. With this work, I expand on the idea that moments of beauty and clarity intersect moments of chaos and uncertainty. The interior of each cube contains a hidden world of bubbles, voids, cracks, and patterns. These ephemeral words can evoke the wonder of the chance encounter as well as the varying human reactions to transformation and temporariness. My art practice is centered on expressing the joyful melancholy of change and impermanence, the Japanese concept of mono no awari, I guess, awari. Minor White is one of my photographic influences and spoke of looking at something until it becomes something else, which I thought was very fascinating. One should not only photograph things for what they are built for, what should not photograph, not only photograph things for what they are, but for what else they are. That's a very important statement, and I just chopped it up badly. I believe he meant this in a spiritual as well as a physical sense. Making the ice cubes in various shapes and watching them transform as I photographed became a journey. The melting rectangle squares and spheres would spin and ride on the puddles of liquid water that they created. Rivulets would stream down the outside. Air pockets would fill with tiny bubbles as if breathing. Cubes sitting next to each other would fuse into new realms. I've been told there is a strong tradition in Japanese photography in which one explores a subject and works it until wisdom emerges, which I thought was very interesting. The idea of taking the time to discover new thoughts and feelings within something so commonplace is beautiful and for me spiritual. And I have deepened my understanding about the process of letting go while photographing these ice cubes. Tiny Cosmologies is ongoing. So I think that's a wonderful statement. And can we look at, just go through all the pictures? Okay, I thought this was a very interesting project, as you could tell from my chopped up reading of the artist statement. I'm fascinated with some of the pictures, but what I find difficult for me is there seems to be a redundancy in some of this. And your work is really defined by your weakest picture. Um, people sometimes ask me, how many pictures should I bring you? And I say, as many as you want, because I want to know what they consider good and what they leave at home. And a lot of times that will tell you a lot about someone's work. I think there are some really striking frames in this, and the concept is really wonderful. Um, but I do feel a sense of redundancy. And I think if you took even one frame out, you would have a stronger group of pictures.
And which one would that be? Which would you take out?
Well, I'd have to really lay them down and think about what to do. Sequencing is hugely important, whether you're talking about a book or a show or anything. And so it has to be how these pictures work together, how they want to talk to each other. And so I would have to lay the pictures down to take them out. But there are, like, for instance, that splashing is kind of similar to some other splashing. So just think about the differences. And you have nothing that's a little looser to give me an idea of the world I'm entering. That might be useful. I'm not certain. I don't mean here's a picture of an ice cube. I mean something that gives me the shape, a part of the shape of an ice cube, or the shear of an ice cube, or the dripping edge of an ice cube. It would help me understand these much more. I love the colors in these. They're just wonderful. And I'm stunned at the explosive quality of the pictures. I think that's really magical. But I do think there's just a little too much of the same thing. So I would try to find a little bit more variation in this. But I just think this is a wonderful idea. There are so many things that we walk past every day and we never pay attention to that are universes in and of themselves. So this was, to me, a very interesting exploration. And I just love the color. This, I think, is just wonderful.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, that's very helpful. I appreciate that. I have so many more, but I have at least 50 of these. And I also have a portfolio that's all circles, or round, cropped round.
Well, I would just try, you say this is a continuing project. I would just try to work on some more diversity. You talked about water trickling down and different things. There are other expressions of this that you could use. And I think always the more diversity that you have in your photographs when you present them, the better. Because what I'm always looking for is pictures that are memorable. To me, this photograph here is a memorable image, and a couple of the others aren't. But I'm like stunned by the explosiveness of that one image. And I got into photography by two things. One, I saw Ansell's Horizontal Aspens, but that was after I saw Dorothea Lange's White Angel Breadline projected the size of an entire wall in my classroom at school, in my introductory photography class, which I'd never planned to take. And, I understood the depression from that picture of hers better than anything that my parents or my grandparents had ever told me. I could see the emotional and physical toll of the depression on just every single person. Here was a man who probably was proud at one time, and yet here he was in a food line with a tin cup and a ruffled hat and hands that were gnarled and a physical body expression that just said, I don't know what to do. How did I get here? And So I learned a lot from that picture. And I'm always searching for pictures that to me are memorable, that change my world and change my experience of it, that help me understand the world better. And you are showing me a part of the world that I never even thought about looking about. And so I think that's important. But I think you have to have variety in this to really make it come across as powerfully as it possibly can.
Wonderful input. Thank you very much. My only question for you would be something that I've been thinking about with abstract photography, and that how, coming from your journalistic background, how do you approach relating to abstract photographs as a viewer?
Well, that sure depends on what you call abstract. I mean, you want to define that a little bit more clearly for me, because I think that a lot of photojournalism at the moment is a little on the abstract side.
But sure, yeah. I think these images that I've given you to look at are abstract.
Yes, I do too.
Okay. So something that is not, you cannot readily tell what it is
Right.
simply by looking at it.
I think if you had something that just gave me a better clue of what I was looking at, I would be more appreciative of every single one of these. Not a picture of an ice cube,
Right.
not that, but something that hinted that this is a cube and it's in the process of becoming a non-cube. It's cold, it's frozen, it's melting. It's some, I need to know something of a starting place that allows me to understand what I'm looking at. And when I understand that, I value these pictures even more.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anybody else have any thoughts about that? Okie dokie. On to the next. Silence is wonderful after all that talking. Who do we have queued up next? Richard?
No, we have Fred Ulrich.
Okay. I'm not seeing Fred.
Oh, it would help if I actually shared the screen.
The technology.
Difficulties.
Okay, so this is Fred Ulrich. By the way, I have never seen such a small group of people with double L's in their names.
Yeah.
It just, as I was typing these names, I'm like, another double L? I thought this was images from around the home by an empty nester. This series of images is an ongoing project that reveals aspects of myself and my wife's life as empty nesters. The photographs here were all made within the downtown and midtown neighborhoods of Phoenix. The images were made in two different locations, one in downtown Phoenix on the 24th floor, and the other in a condominium in Midtown on the 4th floor. So two different altitudes. They were made without any family members directly in the frame, but contain hints of family life through the arrangement of objects in the room, of the many milestones and activities which home life offers. The images here are scenes of our day-to-day routines that are usually always quiet. For me, the most interesting scenes I present are the ones that are very quiet and hint at moments of days gone by with family members engaged and happy. This concept is what I draw from my subject matter profile. The quieter the scenes, the more my memory is jogged. Although these are not typical family pictures with family activities at first glance, they tell a story that only requires one's memories and imagination to complete and begin again a new story in the journey of life. It's a wonderful piece of writing.
Wow.
So let's take a look through. I thought these were pretty interesting scenes. There wasn't exactly a knockout photo in them for me, but I really was kind of enchanted by the notion of what we leave behind us as saying a lot about us.
Yeah.
And the light in these pictures is really lovely, and the technical quality too. But it's just these sweet little moments like this orchid that's just staying there. I'm not as fond of the shadow, but it has its merits. This I thought was interesting. It's clearly somebody was there and just walked away.
Yeah.
And it is often what we leave behind that says more about us. I know that from when my office gets messy.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I've been working on this series since I moved from the Chicago area in 2013 to Phoenix, and in particular downtown. Um, Historically, we raised two kids. We always had a group of people around, even a little corner where the champagne bucket was probably filled more than it wasn't. And now it's re uh, relying on shadows and light to create the activity.
Mm-hmm.
And it's sort of an expression of feeling not abandoned, but alone. And it's images that were just right around me, really speaking at me. And I shoot film, 5x7 sheet film. So, the apartment is only so big carrying the camera around and actually looking at different settings. But I have, probably 20, 30 of these that I've done over the years, and it's been about 10 years.
I think even though you have a wonderful statement, the hardest thing about these pictures is to explain why they're made. But I think this is really very interesting. And God, do I love those parallel lines in that last picture.
Yeah.
I'm a real stickler about converging lines in rectangular buildings. I will tell you, I had experience when I was in college. I had all these photojournalism classes, and it's all about process this film as quick as you possibly can, squeegee it off in Yankee Quick Drive, which will get rid of any headache you've ever had, and print the negatives wet and get it on to wire transmission and all that. And I went to I decided that I wanted to learn the right way to do things. So there was I think a former student of Minor White's, Henry Holmes Smith, who was teaching in the fine arts department, and he was notorious for absolutely despising journalists.
Yeah.
And so I went in to see him, and he said, are you a fine arts major? And I said, no. And he said, well, are you a fine arts minor? And I said, no. And he said, well, what are you then? And I said, a journalist, and he just exploded, and I let him just blow off everything. And I said, if you think journalists are so terrible, when one of them recognizes what you have to offer, don't you think it's in your best interest and everyone else's to let them into your class? And he said, you'll be in the advanced class, not the beginning class. So I showed up and, showed him my portfolio. He said, I think you like to shoot people. And so I went out and I shot people walking down streets, people in um, bleachers, people, anonymous people. I mean, it was just, I didn't know what to do. And I go in to see him, and he says, he looked at the contact sheets, and he looked at me, and he looked at the contact sheets, and he looked at me, and he looked at the contact sheets, and he looked at me, and he said, don't you know any people personally? And so he said, what I want you to do is spend the entire semester shooting on your dorm floor. No place else, just on your dorm floor. Mm-hmm. And I was living in a single room at the time, and that meant that the quarters were very tight, and it caused me to look at things like this that I never looked at before as photographs. I never saw these things before. And I think there are a lot of people who don't see this as kind of their living artwork. And so I think, in journalism, every photographer thinks they need a plane ticket to go find a picture.
Yeah.
And a lot of times it's right there in front of you. So I really congratulate you for looking close to home and seeing these things that are right there talking to you and talking to me, that tell me about home.
Yeah. You're right. A lot of those, it was the light that grabbed me, just that time of day. This turned out to be a lot of form, squares, rectangles, triangles, and it's just a real symmetric, almost a picture of nothing.
Yeah.
As I like to.
One of the things I'm fascinated with is, now you have to watch on television, you're going to get a panel of experts on any topic there is. And usually they're talking from home, and I'm always looking at, what do they got on the wall? What
exactly.
Yes. And those things tell me a lot about the person, whether they're trying to show off or whether they're really studied or, I mean, I just think that home environments are really interesting.
Yeah.
So hang in there.
All right. Well, thank you. And thanks for your comments.
Okay. Who is next?
Next, we're going to see Larry Mangino.
Oh, I'm trying to figure out how to get on the thing here.
Well, we hear you.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
We see you too, but I think we need to see your pictures as well. So
well, I think a better she would because short statement.
The world's shortest statement. I like short statements. Since returning from a prolonged self-exile, which I thought that was really interesting, I have been working on a series of photographs of my estranged home with the working title of Nothing, Arizona. The series is nearly finished and will soon be a self-published book. There are 7 of the 49 images in the series so far. So this gave me some hints, but not answers of what I was going to expect here.
Yeah, I'm sorry, it's not supposed to. It's
I had to laugh when I saw this. I mean, okay. I don't know whether that is a picture on the wall or a window or whatever, but the blue in her shoes and her shirt and the sky and all that faceless brick, the texture contrasts are really interesting. And I did have a little trouble figuring out what you were trying to tell me, but this is a nice catch here. And that's funny.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
I can't figure out how to
I
get
think
visual here.
a
So
headless person and a topless car, an interesting combination. I mean, I really couldn't understand exactly what you were trying to do, except saying the Arizona that I knew is going away. Is that right?
more or less, if I could figure out how to, yeah, sort of. It's an ex it, I've been exchange, whatever we call it, from my own country for a long time, and I came back recently, about 10 years ago, and I find all this. So
Yeah. I just
that's
I'm just back from a trip to
I have no idea.
Indiana, which is where I grew up, and a small town that had a beautiful uh, square um, and courthouse, and now it has a Walmart and a Burger King and a Pizza Hut and all kinds of things that it never had before. And I'm like, who changed the town on me? Well,
There.
you know, it was um, before it had been sort of a comforting place. And now it was just a busy commercial spot kind of in the middle of nowhere. And I really had a hard time figuring out what to make of it. And I don't think you have completely congealed your idea here of what you're trying to present. I think you need to uh, give yourself some more mental definition to make this an effective series. But when you see these changes and these differences, I do think that's important to note. So if I were you, I would give some more thinking to this as you proceed with the project about what really are you trying to say? Because that was the thing that I mean, I read the statement, but when I looked at the pictures, I kind of had an idea of what you were doing, but I wasn't sure. And so I just think if you distill your idea a little bit more, you will probably make better pictures and be more satisfied with them.
Thank
That's
you.
my hunch.
Thank you. I come from a same kind of background as you do, photojournalism, and I now I don't really care about you answering all the questions, which you have to kind of do in photojournalism. When you take pictures and sell them, you want a few little questions, but not much because the editors aren't not all that sharp. So you have to explain everything.
Yeah.
I don't know anything about what my own country is and my own home, my home state, this one. This is Route 66, by the way, and I
Wow.
I used to go there when I was a kid. Well,
Route
once or
66 was a
twice.
biggie.
Yeah, but there's right through the middle of it where the phone poles are. That's where it used to be.
Wow.
It's all grown over. Anyway, a lot has changed here, but I think I've changed more, and that's kind of what I have to sort
Yeah,
out.
I think you have some sorting out to do.
Yeah.
And but I think to see the change is uh, really interesting. For all of our modernization, there are some things that we're losing, and I think that you're feeling a sense of that, and I think it's important for us to note what we're losing because we're moving so fast we don't even see the blur go by us.
Yeah, that's kind of what these pictures are about,
Yeah.
actually. Watching things as wave at them as they go by, I guess.
Is there anything else I can help you with here?
You want to see a whole bunch of pictures? I could send them to you. Want to see 4 books that nobody will ever buy? You can send those to you. But
Well, that
thank
really
you.
sounds enticing. 4 books
Thank
that
you very much.
never buy. Well, if you want to talk more about those in depth, we could schedule a session and stuff. But
I'd like that, I think. Yeah.
I think you really need to sit down and spend some time inside and clarify your thinking and what you're really feeling about all of this, so that you can make that clear to us. You're actually documenting change, and you have to be really clear about what that means to you and what you're trying to say. And I don't think you're quite there yet.
Yeah, it changes me. Most of it's me, I guess. And
Well, we all change.
that's what I see outside, because
We're not
this is new.
26 anymore.
Yeah, right. Unfortunately, this is
But I think there's a lot of merit to that. I mean, um, I feel very blessed that my parents and grandparents talked to me a lot about the Second World War, about the Depression, about all of those things. So those were part of my existence. And therefore, I understand the present in a better way than I would if I didn't know those things. And a lot of the people that you're living around don't know anything about the past of this place.
that's unfortunate, because they live here and they've
Yes, exactly.
here.
And so you need to try to speak to them about what was and what has been lost and what needs to be preserved.
What I've learned outside of this country, which is a lot.
Yeah. It's there's a lot to learn from being outside of this country. Just my little trip to Germany recently was a good reminder of that.
Try living. Anyway, thank you very much. Appreciate
Okay.
it.
Do we have another one?
Yes, now we have Nancy Miller coming up.
Nancy Miller.
Hi, Sandra.
Hi. Well, let's look at your statement. The work presented in my luminescence series began in early 2021 after many months isolated due to the pandemic, which I think affected us all in a lot of strange ways. During that time, it caused me to slow down even further and become even more comfortable with the simple things. Each morning during the walk with our dog, I began to see different light, and an idea started to unfold as I began to shoot the first few images. The process became my meditation, representing and exploring the inner spiritual journey of moving through darkness to light, with challenges, roadblocks, and awakening moments along the way. Utilizing multiple exposures became a path into ephemeral images of light and luminosity, seemingly passing through time and space. The luminescence series is produced as gesso prints. By using and printing on vellum, a layer of translucency is created. When it is backed with gesso, it creates another layer of luminance, thus enhancing the visual experience of light glowing from within in each of us. These have been really good statements. I thought this was a very interesting set of pictures. I can only imagine that in print form, they are much more enchanting. But I really did enjoy looking at them. This one depressed me a little bit, but that's the way it goes. That's quite lovely. And I can really see what you're doing with all this. I mean, I'm paying attention to things that I would not have paid attention to before. I love that. This one was the one I uh, uh, was not enchanted with, and that may be because I'm not looking at an actual print. You've done so much with the print, with your process, that it's really hard to evaluate this. But I just have this feeling of the fragility of life, the enduring quality of life. Um, I thought these soft tones that you got out of your process were really beautiful. Um, so other than that one, which makes me want to cry, I think I think this is a very interesting series. And um, again, like I was saying with the pictures of the interiors of the rooms, you don't have to have a plane ticket to find uh, really interesting things around you. In fact, it's more enriching to you personally and probably to everybody else to look at what's right in front of you. And so I appreciated this sequence of pictures.
Thank you.
Do you have any questions for me?
Well, I really, really trying to get the feeling through these pictures. And I think
Yes.
that the naming of each image really kind of helps convey the emotion behind it. Interesting on that one, made you depressed on the Out of the Dark is
Yeah.
the title.
Yeah, I know, but I couldn't help. There's a lot of dark around lately. I'm trying to get out of it.
No, but thank you, Sandra. I appreciate it.
But I really would continue to pursue this. I think you could wind up with a set of pictures that you don't need captions for, you don't need an explanation for, that are just going to be true experiences for the people who see the show of the work.
Okay. I may set some time with you because I think I got about 30 images in this series. Yeah.
And just remember, it is always your worst piece that defines the level of your work. So, you really have to think carefully about, does this meet your standard? Is this really going to convey what your full intention was? When I worked in Louisville, Kentucky, that newspaper was at that point in time one of the top 3 papers in the country. The New York Times was always first, and then it was either the Louisville Courier Journal and Times or the Wall Street Journal. And neither of those 2 other publications did anything with pictures. And I really transformed the Louisville papers into visual publications. And we used to always say, we don't publish based on effort. So if you climbed a tree and hung out on a branch by your fingertips, if the picture didn't work, it didn't matter. And a lot of times photographers get wound up in how much effort it took to make something or how they felt at the time, but that doesn't translate into the picture. It's a memory picture for them. And so you have to really look very hard at your pictures and see not only what do they do for you, but what are they going to do for other people, because you're presenting them to other people.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Right.
So I think that's everybody on the list, right?
It shouldn't be.
No, there are 2 more.
2 more? Oh, okay.
Okay, you're going to have Rick Gale next, and then Sean McFarland will close it out.
Okay. This was a very interesting statement. Can you roll it up just a little bit? Yeah. So this is montage a series of diptychs. Alfred Hitchcock was known for his deep understanding of the power of montage in filmmaking. He often emphasized how the arrangement of shots could profoundly impact the narrative and emotional resonance of a scene. I would agree with that. Hitchcock believed that by rearranging the same pieces of film, one could completely alter the audience's perception and interpretation of events, which I would also agree with. I found myself drawn to this concept of montage. I began finding intriguing connections between images captured years apart. The diptych emerged as the ideal medium for this exploration. When two images are juxtaposed closely on the same surface, resembling two strips of film spliced together, they evoke their new narrative. This effect is diminished when the images are individually framed on a wall, several inches apart from each other. Then they have no relationship at all. When creating a diptych, several compositional considerations come into play, each contributing to the overall impact and cohesion of the piece. These considerations include the decision of which image to place on the left or right side, graphic alignments, color palette, and possible narratives. And I thought that was a really good description of the things that are involved in the decision. So let's run through the pictures. So I felt like that for me, some of these worked and some of these didn't. So I understand you have two faces here, and one you can see in full, a face that is kind of plastic, and another face that you have in silhouette. But when I looked at that, I didn't really come away with any understanding of what that joining of those two things meant, other than that what they were two faces handled differently. I thought the use of the texture on this was interesting, but I had a problem with some of the composition. I did not notice for a long time that the roof line goes into the horizontal line on the siding. And so I don't think I appreciated the composition quite enough. And I felt kind of abstract about that. This, I'm really not sure what this means. It's very intriguing, but I'm left with that as a mystery. I thought this was interesting. It has a lot of different ways that you can interpret it, and that this was a good use of the diptych. So was this one. I thought this was an interesting pairing that I would not have expected. I liked the colors. I think I missed part of this one. I mean, the bed was interesting, and it looks like there's some violence on the wall on the left, and maybe some violence in the bed. I'm not sure. So I just felt like I needed a little bit more context to be certain about what I was seeing there. But the idea of putting these pictures together is really an interesting one. And I think that the things that you consider are really important. The order that they go in, what pictures go together and what pictures don't. I mean, that's just everything.
Right. What I was actually looking at, and it was kind of a surprising thing from the get-go. It wasn't something that I'd actually planned on actually doing, but it's always very interesting and exciting to go through your archive and see what happens. My way of seeing is basically I don't I don't have anything I don't have anything I want to say in a political vein or social. I don't have any causes. I'm strictly based, for me, a photographer, a photograph, for me to feel connected, I have to have an emotional response immediately. So that's why some of these went together. And then when I was putting them together, when you sequence them, and unfortunately they weren't sequenced.
Yeah.
The one we have on the screen right now, I recognize as an oddball for the rest. But when you sequence them, there is a story there.
Right. I apologize that some of these things are not coming up in the sequence that people intended, and that is, I'm going to blame that on Dropbox. And it really does make a huge difference. I mean, I think sequence is absolutely everything. Sequence, pacing, it just hugely important.
Right.
And also making sure that you don't have something in the collection that takes away from the collection.
Right.
That's confusing or whatever.
But
So
I kind of rely on more of an emotional response by people, looking at images with an open mind, not really trying to figure out what I was trying to say necessarily, but make their own story in while they're viewing it, if they have the time or that they care to do it. But in a sequence, and it probably was my fault for maybe not even, putting them in one document in an order that might be more of a narrative, that might have helped a little bit.
mm-hmm.
But the primary thing that this came from was an exploration and being intrigued by basically Hitchcock's theory of montage.
Mm-hmm.
And he basically breaks it down very simply. You could have a picture, this is his example, a picture of a young lady in a park wearing a sundress, and then you cut to a picture of a man smiling. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
that says one thing, but then you take the same picture of a man smiling and you show a mom and a kid in a baby carriage. That means something totally different, even though they're very similar. So it's something that I'm going to continue exploring. I've got about 29 or 30. And you can either use this concept in a narrative form, or you can be totally just from a graphic point of view where colors and shapes line up together.
Yeah. Yeah, I do think you should continue with this. I mean, I think it can present an interesting body of work. You just need to make sure that all your pairings are strong pairings.
Exactly.
And this first one, you're talking about the reader bringing their own, the viewer bringing their own expression to it because you started out with this X and the red and the cross through the heart. I presumed that the bed scene was violence instead of passion.
Well, that could be. I thought for me it was more of an ironic situation where you have the lovely Valentine candy heart next to something that might imply, a heated exchange, but then you have this messy paint, and it's just I don't know, Diane Arbus said something that a photograph is a question about questions, something like that. And I like that idea. I like the idea of maybe not necessarily, this may not be the right way of looking at these, maybe not necessarily believing, in this case, these two pictures work together, but it's like, what can I make someone think or see by doing this?
I think the thing is that you need to have enough of a doorway that people are open to explore it rather than confused from the outset and don't know where to go with it. So that's a very fragile, almost cellophane requirement to me to keep people engaged in the work,
right?
And to bring their own ideas to it.
Yeah, I'll keep working on it. You got to produce 10 to 20 pictures to get a good one.
Yeah.
So,
Oh, that's the way it works.
yeah, I appreciate your input.
Okay. Do we have anyone else? I think we do. One more?
Yes, I'm queuing up Sean McFarland. You will be your
Oh,
final
yes.
reviewee.
Okay. Ah, the privilege of traveling to the Philippines over the past 12 years, 9 visits in all, has afforded me a unique perspective to watch a culture evolve more rapidly than I could possibly predicted. One can pull into a Starbucks for a macchiato, later grab lunch at Jollibee, then step back into the streets to witness the old time honored vending of vegetables, street food, and goods in the same way Filipinos' grandparents and great grandparents have done for centuries. I selected these photos from an emerging body of photographs from my recent travels around the northern Philippines. Each time I return, I see less of the old ways and more of the embraced modernism, pushing aside the cultural practices that uniquely and beautifully give the Filipinos their identity. As a photographer in a country that is not my own, these things jump out at me and gives me pause for fear that we might see these things, for fear we might see these things again. And I wonder who will carry on the traditions. My eye gravitates towards the old practices, and my camera becomes the tool to preserve them. These images are from Dagpan City, Vegan City, and I'm terrible about these pronunciations, in the provinces of Luzon and Ilos. Uh, Sorry for the fractured name, Sean. Um, can we go through these? Okay. I thought there was some wonderful use of light in here. Can we go back to the beginning? Okay. It's really curious to me that your connection with people is really great, and yet I feel distant from them. Um, I I have a hard time explaining that, but it's like they're there for you, and you're not as much there for them. I don't know if that makes sense to you. Um, this street scene was interesting. It's a little confusing as to how it fits with your theme, other than you've got a flat tire in the middle of the road. But I'm with you that I would like to see these traditions carried on. This particular picture is an example of what I was saying about, you have a good connection with the person, but I don't feel as connected as I want to be. And she doesn't have to look up at you to feel that way. You have to feel more of her, I think. This is a self-portrait, and I did not find you in the self-portrait other than the lady over on the right. So I really couldn't make sense of this other than that this was a old religious scene that was lovely. And this is a nice scouting troop or whatever. I mean, we get to see a little bit of the old architecture in the back and the new architecture, but I'm not seeing as much of the kind of thing that you're aiming for out of these frames. This too, it seems like you kind of caught him in mid-action, and he's not, it's not quite the moment. I feel like I've been a little inadequate in explaining my feelings to you. Do you have any questions?
No, but thank you for sharing the feedback. This is an emerging body of work, and it's interesting because some of the ones that are selected here, I chose the jeepney photo simply because they're trying to get them off the streets. They're Isuzu diesel gas guzzling polluters, although they are deeply entrenched in the local culture. That's why that one went in there. So I have quite an immense number of photos and not sure what to do with all of them. And so it's become almost an aspect of my photography because I do a lot of street photography. And some of these ones that are taken in the evening are ones, I took these right about midnight, and I'm literally ducking behind telephone poles trying to not be seen, to try and capture some more candid moments around. So but I appreciate your feedback, because one of the things that I'm very sensitive about, and that's actually a cousin through marriage. And when I brought out the camera, he started bringing out the goats. So I literally have 5 photos of him bringing it. He was so excited I'm there with my camera. He's like, I've got goats to show you. And I'm like, I'll take pictures of you and your goats. And it was really kind of wonderful. He was so deeply proud of them. And I was just thrilled somebody wanted to stand in front of my camera with these amazing goats. So I mean, it's just kind of funny. There's some strange moments in there, and some fun ones too. But trying to find direction for the work and trying to capture some of these things, trying to really capture some of the things that people are doing with their hands and the changing of traditions. It's a larger body of work. It would be great to have you look at this, because I could use some direction as to what I'm going to do with all this.
Yeah. I think it's an important subject to document. I mean, every time I pick up the phone with any corporation, I'm hooked to the Philippines. And I can tell because people are really very polite, and there are chickens in the background.
Yep.
And not always chickens, but sometimes chickens. And I did a book with Kim Kamenich on the Marcos Revolution. And so I do have some kind of strange connection to the Philippines, and think that globally they are very important for us, and for themselves, really. But what I feel when I look at these things is that people like you, but you are not going as deeply into their spirit as you could. I mean, this is a really hard thing to explain, but I think you need to feel what they feel more and let them do what they do. I mean, the goat thing, that's one of the things you just do. But in the weaving and this picture here, and there was another one I can't think of right now. I mean, these girls like you. I mean, there's no question about that. This lady, I mean, she was comfortable around you, but you don't tell me how she feels about her work. And that's what I want to know. I want to know the treasure that these people see in doing this work, or the comfort, or whatever it is that you think makes this an important thing to document. And so I think you need to reach even deeper emotionally. I mean, you've done way better than a lot of people at that, but I still think you need to dive a little deeper.
Thank you. I'll be there for 2.5 weeks in October.
Well,
so
that'll give you an opportunity.
I will take these words to heart.
Okay. One of the things that I suggest is a lot of times, especially with street photography, people just go, something moved, click, something moved, click, you know, and they're skeet shooting. And, you know, many times I've said, you are telling me that this is true about this person. Did you ever go up and ask them? Well, no, why would I do that? Well, because you've already made your conclusion about all of this. I find that a lot of times walking up to people, introducing yourself, saying, you know, you're fascinated with what they're doing and you'd just like to hang around for a while. Is that okay? You know, and if you can give them a picture back in exchange, that's a great thing. But I think a lot of times we don't stop and talk to the people that we're photographing, and therefore we don't get the depth out of the pictures that we could, and we don't get the depth out of the life experience that we could.
Thank you so much. That's important to me.
Okay. So we've rounded up all of the people willing to go through this ordeal. I would like to know what questions anybody has about the critique or about me or how I got so crazy or whatever it is that you have to ask about.
Well, one thing I think is I really appreciate your style, because so often critiques have a tendency to not talk about what the person was trying, good, bad, or indifferent, but they get critiques on what they should have done, as opposed to looking at what they're trying to do, which is what you were doing, and giving them ideas on how to continue with what their idea is, rather than
what I'm always looking for is the potential in each photographer, the potential in each story. That's what we're there to work with. And what is before me is just the evidence of what is past and what we have to work with so far, whether that's with a book or an ongoing project or whatever. I'm constantly looking for the potential, and everybody has different kinds of potential. Right. And so that's what I want to bring out. And I have found that there's just no point in doing it any other way. I mean, you want people to be the best they can be.
Right.
And that's what I'm hoping to help people do.
Well, you did it.
Oh, thank you.
Well, question I have is there a way to bridge the gap so that you can actually see the prints rather than the JPEGs?
Well, the only problem is I live in Seattle.
Yeah.
And any of my trips at the moment are going back to Indiana to see my mother, who just had 2 falls and has been in the hospital quite a bit this fall. And so I'm probably not headed for Arizona anytime soon. If you trust sending your stuff in the mail, I'm okay about that. I can't think of any other way to do it.
Yeah. Well, that might be a way to bundle it up and ship it, maybe. But I really think especially with Nancy's, and I've seen her work up close and able to in inches of it. It's just
a whole different thing.
Yeah, it's a completely different thing.
I mean, I as soon as she explained what she was doing with that was immediately clear to me that it was, I could talk about what my reaction was on the screen, but I know the reaction is different on the wall.
Yeah.
I mean, it can't possibly be the same.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
But look, at least we have Zoom.
I know. It's a great thing.
I mean, we couldn't even talk about any of this if we didn't have Zoom.
Thanks to the pandemic.
So Zoom works pretty well for most things.
Yeah.
I'd like to say something.
Yes.
This has been an absolute pleasure. Whoops, I don't know what happened to my camera. Whoa, I'm just like, I don't know what happened.
You went in the dark.
Yeah, well, I'm sitting in the dark because it's easy on my eyes, but I was fine. Here, hold on a second. Whoa, that's way too much. Well, anyway.
You're either fluorescent or invisible, one of the two.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but I mean, it's been ages since I was in a portfolio review like this, and it's just been so insightful. I've taken so many notes, and I really appreciate your input that you gave everybody. And thank you. I just wanted to say thank you.
I appreciate that. I frequently find that people whose work is not being discussed learn important things for their work too.
Absolutely.
So there really is value in doing this as a group. Like Richard was saying, you know, when I was in fine art classes in college, we would do these critiques standardly. And, you know, you'd sit there and be kind of nervous about what anybody was going to say about your stuff, but you learned a lot from all the other stuff, as well as learning some things from your stuff. So I think that that's very helpful. I do in-depth critiques and work with people. I mean, like for a portfolio, to talk about a portfolio, we might talk for 2 or 3 hours. And I do work on projects where we usually talk about 2 hours each time for 4 sessions, and which can be repeated over again. But I want to, it's not my intention to say, I like this, I don't like that, go away. I'm trying to learn as much about the photographer as I possibly can, and as much about the work as I can, in order to find the core thing that is going to help them move forward. Photography is an interesting vocation in that when you start out, your learning is very fast at first. You learn to focus. Oh my God, I can focus. And then you have a very short plateau, and you're like, oh my God, I've learned about light. And then another little bit longer, but not much longer plateau. And then, oh my God, I've learned about depth of field. This is really cool. I'm just growing so fast. And the longer you're at it, the bigger the plane between growth spurts becomes. And the harder those growth spurts are, because they're really complicated things. And a lot of times you really need some help to move you forward. And I think one of the things that's always important for you to do when you look at your work, say to yourself, what are my questions about this work? Because you can't move forward if you don't know what you're questioning. And so, you know, I will also say about pictures, I just love pictures. And I've done tons and tons and tons of design. I mean, thousands of pages, and, you know, it's just a lot of design. And I have discovered that pictures will have their way. I will start a layout and say, well, this picture is obviously the lead picture, and this picture is obviously the closer. And I will work and work and work and work and work to make this work, and it just will not work. I know, I mean, I look at it and I know it just doesn't work. And I say, what are your assumptions? Your assumption is this picture must be the lead picture. What if it wasn't the lead picture? What else could be the lead picture? And a lot of times the closing picture winds up becoming the lead picture, and the lead picture wanders off someplace else. And how those things sit together on a page, how they work with type, how the pictures speak to each other and in what sequence you see them is so important to understanding the work. And I just never cease to be fascinated about that. I mean, the pictures really have their own voice. And sometimes when you're in the middle of making the pictures, you forget to listen to them. You're listening to what's inside here. You need to look what's inside here. I had a lady who, I've got many stories like this, but I had a lady who spent about 6 months working with a woman who was a convict in a prison. And she had found Jesus, and she had murdered several members of her family. She had found Jesus, and she wanted to be released early because her life had been reformed and she'd seen the light and all that kind of thing. And so my friend brought me a stack of pictures about like contact sheets about like this. And I'm sitting down, I'm going through all these pictures, and there's one frame in there that's an accidental frame. And I look at that frame and I'm like, that's who that woman is. Mm. And I told my friend Marianne, I said, Marianne, I hate to tell you this, but this woman is fooling you. She has your number. This is not real. And she says, oh no, I would know. I've spent 6 months with her. I spent all kinds of situations. I've, you know, just, I really know what's going on here. And I said, well, I'm just telling you, she's got your number. She's playing you like a fiddle. And about 3 months later, Marianne calls me up and says, how did you know that? She just exploded and said that I was such an idiot and this was such a ridiculous exercise that all she wanted was a story to get her out of prison in the first place. And how in the world could I know this? And I said, it's in the contact sheets. It's in the film. And if you just look at the film will tell you many things. The images will really, you just have to pay attention to them. So, I like pictures, what can I say? And I like photographers. They're all different, they're all interesting. They've all got different stories. And I wanted to be a photographer, but I hit the world too early. And, you know, you could only be, if you were going to college, you had two options, nurse, teacher. I knew I wasn't going to be a nurse. And the last month with my mother in assisted living proved to me that I was exactly correct about that choice. So I was going to be a high school math teacher. And I just wandered into journalism totally by accident. And this is where I was supposed to be. I want to help people understand each other. And I think the world is better if we can understand each other.
I have one last question. Very nice. And that is, during your White House years.
Oh, yes.
Which administration got it?
Gerald Ford.
Okay.
The Ford experience was really important. I had the best job in the world in Louisville. And I was just burning up the freeway. And I had photographed Richard Nixon when he was on the chicken dinner circuit for the 68 nomination, you know, conventions and all that. And I would sit there with a 500 millimeter lens for an hour and a half, watching him go buck, 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 to buck, 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 you know, back and forth to people. And I just could not get over the fact that as I looked at him, there was this black space in him that I could not understand. I just simply could not make sense of it. Mm-hmm. And I wasn't, you know, anti-Nixon or anything. It was, I'd covered McCarthy and Kennedy and McGovern and you name it. But Nixon was just this black hole mystery to me. And so I was curious about the whole Watergate thing and everything. I didn't particularly form an opinion about it, but the assistant managing editor who had gained a lot of trust in me as a junior person, said, Sandra, I want you to produce a special section because we think Nixon's going to resign tomorrow. And so we have to have something ready to go. And so I went to our library, which was absolutely amazing. We had about 20 feet worth of Nixon pictures because he'd been in politics for a long time. And I realized why people were so fooled by this person. There were basically only 5 pictures of him, and none of them were real pictures. There was the "you first, oh no, you first" picture. There were the 2 guys sitting there in gold chairs. There's the guy in front of the presidential seal. There's this. And that was just about it. I mean, I could say that there were maybe 3 frames that did not fall into that category. And I realized that we were facing a presidency of a person we had no idea of. I mean, people were disappointed to learn that this person that they thought was amazing was actually kind of vile. And I felt that it was really important to the country that whether they liked Gerald Ford or not was irrelevant to me, but they needed to know who he was. Absolutely know who he was. And so David Kennerly called me up and said, would you be interested in this job? And I said, yes, why don't you call me back when I'm not on deadline? And so I wound up with the job, which did not surprise me at all. And David and I agreed that we wanted to do the documentation in black and white, that it was going to be a documentation. And I had several times when there were, I think 3 or 4 times I went up to the press office, which was the standard thing that you did, to see if I could get a picture released for someone. And Larry Speaks was still in the office then, and I would bring this picture in, and Larry would say, yeah, but he's not smiling. I'm like, Larry, the world is falling apart. Our allies are adrift. They don't know what to expect of us. The economy, we have like 13% inflation, or, I mean, there was a travesty headed in every direction. I said, if this guy was smiling about this, we should wonder about him. And so, the journalist in me, I walked back downstairs and I said to Kennerly, this is absolutely ridiculous. There is no point in any of this. And he turned on his heel, walked up to the Oval Office, which was just upstairs from my office, and said to the president, we will be resigning from the press office, okay? and it wasn't a question, it was a directive. And from that time on, I was the person who decided what pictures were released. I was conservative about it, and it was only the pictures that we couldn't predict or that involved national security or something like that. And David invited, I think it was 44 different photographers in for everything from a day with the president, with the full access that he had, to 3 months. And so the world got a picture of the president from 40 different angles, plus Associated Press and the UPI and all the standard photo op stuff. And from me, they got real behind the scenes things that, helped people understand who this person was. Yeah. And I think that that was a tremendous, of tremendous importance at that time, because people, they'd never even heard of Gerald Ford. They didn't elect him. They didn't know anything about him. Mm-hmm. So that was really, really an important thing to do. And I was the only picture editor. I was the first picture editor the White House had ever had. And so I could kind of pave my own path. And I went back later and I worked for W and I worked for Obama. And Obama was good, but I think there were far too many staff pictures released that they should have allowed more journalists in to validate who Obama was and help us see him in ways beyond Pete Souza. Pete is an amazing photographer, but his voice should not be the only voice that's heard. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah, I gave up.
Thank you for that, by the way.
I gave up a great job and a marriage to do that White House job because I really felt that was important. And as a matter of fact, one of the things you have to do is you have to sign allegiance to the president.
Mm-hmm.
And Joe Biden referenced this in a speech he gave Memorial Day, I think it was. And I gathered people around me and I said, I know I have to sign this in order to get this job, but I want to make this clear to everybody here that I work for the American people. Mm-hmm. I do not work for Gerald Ford. And that is who I represent. I represent the American people and the Constitution. And as long as Gerald Ford walks the straight line, we're fine. And if he doesn't, I will let the world know about that. Because, you know, here was this guy that nobody knew and nobody knew what to do about. And my God, he pardoned Nixon. What was he thinking? And after I got to the White House, I understood why he pardoned Nixon. I mean, he was concerned. Nixon had phlebitis very, very bad. And he, just as a human being, he was concerned that Nixon would die from that. Yeah. But he also knew, which was so obvious to me as I sat there and listened to press briefings over and over and over every day after the pardon and everything, the country's business could not move forward if he had not been pardoned.
Yeah.
There was just no, I mean, there were arguments about when the bus was going to leave, you know, suspicions that somehow the White House was going to trick the press about when the press bus was going to leave. You know, it was just everything down to the tiniest detail was scrutinized because all the people who missed the Watergate story, you know, who weren't part of the Washington Post effort, didn't have those sources. They thought, well, I can't let this pass me again. And so I'm going to check every single little detail. So that's my long story.
Very interesting.
Yeah, I've done a lot of interesting things. For instance, some of the internet design that you look at every day is my design. I really changed the face of the internet with that design and made content management systems really practical. So the width of the type that you read and how navigation is done and a whole lot of things, you know, came out of that effort. And when I took that job at Microsoft, people said, what are you doing throwing a perfectly good career away on something as crazy as this? And I said, I just don't think you understand.
Can I say something?
Yeah.
Thank you for, by the way, for organizing this whole thing, Richard, and appreciate that there's somebody that from my gremlin that it's out there. Thank you from a journalist point of view. Appreciate that, really, especially what we said about Peter Sousa and it's exclusive.
Yeah,
appreciate that.
That's not a proper thing, in my opinion.
No, it's not. It was terrible.
And those pictures were released by the boatload. I mean, I helped make pictures possible to release on the internet rather than through prints, but he just took that way too far.
That should not have happened.
Yeah.
That should not have happened. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Quite welcome. I've really enjoyed talking with you all, and I hope maybe we can do this again sometime, or our paths cross again. It's been very interesting to talk with you. And like Richard said, my website is theprofessionaleye.com, and there's everything you'd want to know about me there and more. And I'm sandra.eisert@gmail.com. So just mention the AZPA in your subject line if you have a question for me.
All right.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much,
Thank you
Sandra.
so much, Sandra.
You're quite welcome.
That was
I've
great.
tried meeting all of you.
All right. I think we'll call it an evening then. Thank you so much. And you've got us off to a good start in this new venture, I think. So thanks
Good.
for that.
Good.
All right.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Take care. Good night.
Good night.